Okay, perfect. So like I was just stating, my name is Caitlin Poles and I work in community relations at Unity Hospice and Palliative Care. And as Judy was stating before, we've just worked together on certain patient cases and with different physicians and just trying to get into the community more and talk about things that are really important like this topic today. So the first slide, I'm just going to briefly go over what the description was on the email, and then I'm going to introduce my the true presenter here. I'll present a little bit, but really it's going to be Stephanie Lubin. So this first slide, obviously we're here to talk about the experience of grief, and the grief related to the loss of a loved one is difficult in any way, as we know, but it can be especially difficult during the holidays. And so we're just going to talk about what's normal, who to talk to, how to cope. And this presentation really does focus on normalizing the grief experience and highlighting the effects during the holidays and addressing ways that, those who are grieving can manage the emotions, decisions, and events during the holidays. So we welcome you. Thank you guys so much for being here. Okay, and that's our little logo there. So, and I'm going to stop right here because I do want to introduce Stephanie before we get to the presentation. So Stephanie Lubin, LCSW, ACHP social worker, is an experienced hospice social worker with Unity Hospice. She received an undergraduate degree in psychology from Cornell University, a master's degree in education from Harvard University, and a master's degree in social work from Loyola University, Chicago. Stephanie has offered numerous presentations on end of life, hospice, dementia, and grief. Her focus is always on ensuring the best quality of life for the living. And I can attest to this. I've been working with Stephanie for many years now, and she is a wonderful support for all of our patients, including myself. So thank you so much again, Stephanie, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be a part of this opportunity. I'm always amazed at how many people come out that are out there that I can't see, but I'm grateful that you're here on a very, very cold in Chicago. Anyway, I hear some of you are in much warmer climates, but thank you, Judy and Caitlin, for the opportunity to be with you today. I realize that end of January isn't exactly in the prime of the holidays. However, grief is an experience that exists 24/7, 365 days a year for many of us and doesn't have a particular timeline. Although some of the experiences, the feelings, the reactions are different during the holidays. So that's kind of the focus of this session, but has a lot of, ability to transcend just this time of year. So this slide, I always like how we want grief to work, sort of in a linear, progressive way, but grief never really works that way and often is upside down, inside out, and sideways, and creates a lot of turmoil and chaos, and never seems to really go in any way that you might predict, which is predictable. So the uncertainty and the unpredictability is something that's actually normal and can be comforting in and of itself, knowing that it's not a linear process. There are some historical grief experts like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross that had stages of grief that we've sort of come to understand really don't exist in a linear, first this, you feel this, and then you feel that experience. It sort of can be all over the place, but we're here to actually look at what you might feel, how we can cope, and how we can continue to move through the grief experience. So the expectation is that you're going to feel something. When you lose a loved one, there will always be a myriad of feelings. Sometimes you might feel extra vulnerable, particularly during the holidays. You don't know how to exist. You don't know who to be without your loved one at this time. You might have a lot of mood changes, ups and downs, and one day you're excited and happy to be with loved ones and grandchildren, and other days you just don't want to be with anyone and have nothing to say, or you're really irritable. Social needs might change. So there might be a lot of invitations to be out and about with people, to go to a holiday party, to be a part of a religious event. And sometimes you might really want to be a part of those things. And other times you might just want to stay in bed and not really present yourself because the grief is too much. Eating and sleeping patterns can really vacillate at this time too. You might be feeling like you're just eating a lot to fill a void that you might have. Perhaps you're sleeping a lot, or maybe you're having difficulty sleeping. Pay attention to those eating and sleeping disturbances. They can really be very telling about how you are and when you might need a little bit more support. You might find that there's just a lot of people around you that just want to cheer you up. They want to get you out of the doldrums. They want you to stop feeling sad. They want you to get out and do something. And sometimes those demands are too much, but sometimes they can also be really comforting. You might be angry. You might just be so upset and angry at the world for having taken your loved one, having to exist alone at this time of year. And that's just, another very normal response. You might also have just sort of these unpredictable periods of intense sadness where you're just in the grocery store and you see your loved one's favorite chocolate cake and all of a sudden you burst out into tears, or there's some other something that seems very benign that you look at or you interact with and it just stirs up a lot of sadness. And this time of year can just create this swirl of emotion, the swirl of differences in how we behave and how our body reacts. And the most important thing to keep in mind is that it's all extremely normal. These are things that everyone experiences at one time or another, and it's incredibly normal and okay to feel all of these things. This slide really looks at all of that too. It's just sort of a way of identifying all of these things that we might feel and experience in relationship to the grief that we have, the fatigue, the confusion, the low energy, the dread of going to social events, maybe some loneliness, sleeplessness, no appetite, withdrawal, sadness, isolation, feeling lost. These are all very normal, very much a part of the grieving experience. Sometimes you might have some of these, sometimes none of these. They might not be apparent for the first 6 months, a year, and then all of a sudden, the second year, you're sort of allowing yourself to sort of let down and experience all of these things. And again, we just want to normalize that this is all very much a part of the grief experience. No journey of grief is the same. And to allow yourself to just feel whatever it is that you're feeling at any time.
Okay. And just like we keep saying, grief is very normal, not just during the holidays, but every day. And unfortunately, on the PowerPoint, we do have a couple of little bullet points that sometimes grief is triggered by. And so, or sometimes, things come up like jealousy. So we're not proud of jealousy, but jealousy sometimes creeps up when we see our friends and our family's happiness. And seeing this happiness can sometimes trigger our own memories, and that's understandable and it's okay. Sometimes the holidays too can bring up key roles that people played that we have lost. So this also brings up memories of the special person, sometimes the role they used to play in specific holidays, like your father cutting the turkey, or mom used to decorate the table, Aunt Beverly making cookies the morning of. All of these things can kind of be triggered during the holidays. Also, a lot of the time we have sensory triggers during the holidays, and some of sensory triggers are sound. They can be sights, smells, textures, and taste. And obviously with a lot of holidays, these are heightened, right? Making our memories all that stronger. And this can make us feel very overwhelmed, upset, and anxious. And we know we can't escape the holidays. I think that's hard. We know that they're going to be coming back every year, but that's why we want to try to normalize these feelings as best we can. We want to eliminate the guilt felt when these feelings come up. And, just to point out, COVID has made it difficult for all of us. We've missed a lot of gatherings that may have been helpful to go to see the people that we still have. It has been a very strange year, especially for grief, leaving a lot of us feeling even more isolated than we did before, possibly lost and burnt out, but at least, you're not alone. A lot of us are experiencing these very same feelings as well. Okay. And again, going, with the pandemic, and Stephanie can attest to this, I hate the saying, but it is true. These are unprecedented, precedented times. So a lot of these things we're starting to experience that we've never experienced before because we've never been in a pandemic before. So, loss of routine and predictability, that leads to the loss of control. Death, of course, loss of life. That's what we're talking about today. Loss of health, our own and, someone close. Loss of relationships and friends because we have been so isolated. Like I just touched upon before, the loss of events and celebrations that usually bring us together, and they're enlightening moments like graduations, proms, weddings, funerals. The loss of entertainment and social life, definitely, unless you're a Netflix connoisseur like myself, it has been very difficult. The loss of physical activity, the loss of endings, the loss of future, independence and freedom is a big one. And then some of us even lost, employment and income. So all of these really have made grief even that much more difficult, especially during the holidays.
So the question is, well, we've discussed the normalcy of all of these feelings, the impact of COVID, all of these losses, not just the loss of a loved one, but so much that has been lost due to COVID. How do we cope with all of these feelings? What do we do? How do we manage ourselves and find our way forward? And I think what we have found is that there's sort of two sort of modes of thought, or two different strategies in coping with some of these losses. And what's most important is to focus both on honoring the loved one that has been lost and taking care of yourself. So, and in so doing whatever it is that serves you best in the moment for yourself. And so honoring your loved one. What are ways to remember the loved one that you have? Sometimes, the temptation is to forget, is to avoid, and to put away for a little while because maybe the pain is too great. And we can talk about that sort of in the next slide. But for this moment, let's focus on how do we remember our loved one at a time where our feelings might be really profound. And some ways to think about that are thinking about a holiday table or a Christmas celebration or a faith tradition that you might have during the holidays. And you might say a prayer at some point to honor your loved one and to invoke the memory in the moment. Sometimes lighting a candle. Candles are very evocative and can bring a lot of meaning and sort of that feeling of light, and bringing the light and honoring your loved one by lighting a candle is a good way to show a gesture in honor and in memory. Mm-hmm. Maybe creating an online tribute. There's all different ways these days. There are tributes on funeral home pages. There are vlogs and blogs that people create. And maybe there's an opportunity to jot down the thoughts and the feelings that you've been having and put it out there for others to enjoy and to share in those memories that you might have at this time. Maybe at the Thanksgiving table or the Christmas morning breakfast, you share a memory or a favorite story that you have of your loved one, something that you remember of a particular memory at the time of the holidays that is particularly meaningful. You don't want to lose that memory as part of your family experience. So sharing the story, being intentional about bringing that forward. And inviting others at the same time to share memories. Maybe that encourages others, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, colleagues, who might not have had any other outlet to kind of express how they've been feeling about the loss of this individuals. And so inviting them as well to share their memories of your loved one. Include places of worship. So maybe there's a synagogue or a church or a mosque that you have gone to and been a part of prayer and spiritual religious services or activities. Maybe that's a place of comfort where you can go and honor the memory of your loved one. Perhaps it's a time like this forum in particular to grieve and to share your grief with others, to join a support group, to be a part of a group of others who really understand what you're going through, to derive support in that way from others who have had that experience. Maybe it's an opportunity to give of yourself, to donate time or money to a particular organization or company or activity that really seems to embody the values and the work or the person that your loved one was. Maybe doing something that your loved one liked to do, doing something together that they really enjoy, taking a walk in the woods or going to a museum or listening to some music or whatever it might be that may be difficult to get through, but sharing that experience with others to really solidify your memory of your loved one and to just sit with the feelings in that special moment. Maybe this is a time to go through items from their closet or from the home or from the room that you've kind of set aside that didn't have the opportunity to go through before, and pick a few items to gift to friends or family, that this may be the time to really honor your loved one's memory in a way that's very concrete and very special, so that others have specific mementos to remember your loved one by. Honoring traditions, like I said before, really marking maybe that this is something you're going to do every holiday in honor of your loved one, whatever it might be, having a particular prayer or a particular food or a particular ritual that really is able to ground your feelings and keep the memory of your loved one alive. And finally, if your husband, that you might have lost a husband or a grandparent or whomever it was that had a particular spot at the table, acknowledging that the empty chair at the table is going to be difficult, that grandpa or your husband isn't, your wife, spouse, whomever it is, isn't there any longer, isn't going to be sitting in that chair across from you. And, sometimes draping that chair with a particular blanket or a favorite t-shirt or something to honor that space, literally, of that individual, so that someone else isn't taking the place of that individual, but rather you're honoring their spot in a way that is meaningful and memorable to all.
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, we did lose one slide, but Stephanie did touch upon it. It says, how others can support the bereaved. And Stephanie did a great job of already discussing this, but since we already know how grief feels, we can possibly help others with theirs. And I love when Stephanie says, we're all in different places on our grief journey, and some are at the beginning, some are at the middle, it's ongoing, but, we can help remind others that they're not alone in their feelings, and we can support one another. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. So I apologize that it's not written on here, but that's another way that we can kind of work with our own grief, is to help others as well.
I'm going to go back, actually. We missed one slide. But this one was sort of the other angle to look at. So I was sort of focusing on how do we cope with some of these feelings of grief in honoring our loved one. And this one is more, how do we identify and cope for ourselves? What do we do for ourselves to actually take care of ourselves in the face of these feelings? And so one way is to maybe volunteer, maybe sort of getting outside of yourself to offer your services, your time to someone else that might also honor your loved one's memory, but in a way of just sort of taking care of you and focusing on what you can do to cope with what you're feeling. Maybe traveling somewhere new, maybe going to a spot totally different that you would have ever considered when your loved one was with you. Maybe just creating a new memory and having an experience with other family members that you might not otherwise have had. Spend time in nature. This is one of my most favorite, and I go to it all the time, really. Just being outside, taking a walk along the lake, going to the woods, going to the pool with your grandchildren, whatever it is, being in nature can be so incredibly soothing and just provide that grounding for yourself to be able to manage the experiences and the feelings of grief that you might have. Engaging in healthy exercise. I know when it's, 5 below, it's hard to think about walking outside, but, maybe indoors on a track, or just walking up and down the stairs in your building, or walking, just around the corner, just doing something that just moves your body a little bit, that makes you feel a little bit like you're getting out of bed and taking care of yourself. Maybe starting a new book, finding something that you might not have had time for. Maybe you were caring for your loved one for a long time and didn't have time to really focus on yourself and on things that you enjoy, like reading something new. Maybe splurging on a gift for yourself, finding something that just, something that you put off and hadn't thought about, but just engaging in something really indulgent to take care of you and to remind yourself that you're important, that it's important to take care of yourself. Maybe not so much at this time, but going to a concert or going to the theater when things are a little bit more open and safe to do so can be a way of just getting outside again, getting outside of yourself and just sort of engaging more in the outside world to treat yourself, to take care of yourself in ways that fuel you and fill you up. Maybe making some new traditions. We talked before about sort of honoring some of the traditions of your loved one, but maybe this is a time to have some new people create new opportunities that are going to be new things that you'll engage in moving forward. Settle into a new routine, whatever the new normal might be for this time of year, but to just sort of allow that this is kind of the new normal moving forward, and to settle into what you can do for yourself that serves yourself on any given day. And especially to just give yourself grace, to continue to know that this is a journey, that there is no, as we saw before, this is not linear. There's no time frame. Grief is something that will sort of be a part of you for a long time. It will take different shapes and will take different sizes, but it's a need to give yourself grace to feel whatever you feel. And finally, to allow for refusal. So especially around the holidays when people are inviting you, expecting you, needing you, it's really okay to say no and to create those boundaries for yourself and to say, I need to just focus on me today and not accept this invitation that I know is just going to be too hard for me. So those are sort of the crux of how do we cope with all these different feelings of grief at a time, especially around the holidays when some of these things can be too much. And so finally, there are additional resources around, so many. These are some that will be included. You'll have access to them. I know Judy said we're recording this session. And so there are some particular books of interest: Finding Meaning by David Kessler and On Grief and Grieving by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, that focus on grieving and on grief. Bearing the Unbearable by Joanne Cacciatore. And then there are a number of local organizations that offer support and therapy for individuals going through grief in particular. There's the Dove Center in Evanston. There's DLA Psychology Center in Ravenswood that offers specific support around grief and loss. Jewish Child and Family Services has a variety of groups and opportunities. And then In-Home Counseling is a citywide Chicagoland organization that offers in-home individual support and counseling for those with all kinds of needs, including grief in particular. So just some additional resources should you need them.
Okay. And I also want to say, Judy, I don't know if you can email this PowerPoint out, because the one that we emailed, like I said, we did lose a couple slides, and it's a wonderful presentation to be able to read. So hopefully Judy can get that to you so you guys can take a look. But I want to thank again, Stephanie. She does a lot of these, but she is such a wonderful presenter and just very personable and loving person. So, I want to say thank you. And also, we know that this is an ongoing process and a journey. And we believe, though, that these meetings can really hold large impacts in our lives if we open ourselves up to it and confront the grief. And remembering we have a community like this to fall back on and speak with is a wonderful tool. That's why I was very happy that Judy kind of introduced us and we got to be a part of it. And, we're not alone, and we're all here. And I applaud you all for being here to work through the grief and helping one another as a community. And I want to especially thank you again, Judy. I've been working in hospice and in healthcare for the past 9 years, and it's very rare to find someone as involved as Judy is. She knows everyone by name. Every time I'm in her office, she is giving hugs, advice, and I've never really seen that, at hospitals and, Unity's like that, because we've been a family, and we're a smaller organization, but it is unbelievable, Judy. So I just wanted to let you know that it's incredible, and I really respect you, and I appreciate you having us today.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Mm-hmm. So
thank you so much, Judy. Yes, I'd be happy, or either of us, to entertain any questions, comments, needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everyone is familiar with how to raise your hand or unmute yourself. I'm going to allow all participants. I think you're able to unmute yourself and ask a question or a comment, make a comment. I just sent a message to everyone if you would like to unmute. But one of the things I want, and Stephanie and Caitlin, it's been a pleasure, because you and I have been working on some projects, so it's been a pleasure working with you as well. But Stephanie, thank you so much for bringing this information to us and just sharing, because, the year goes by and we get to those holidays, and that's when it all sometimes really hits a person really hard in terms of their loss, or where they are, or if they're lonely, if they're by themselves. And over the past years, we've been able to congregate and join friends for dinner or lunch, or get together for a holiday meal or birthday gathering, and we sort of lost that. So this all entails the loss of people, whether they be dead or alive. You've lost a lot around you. But one of the things I wanted to just touch upon, I know you talked about honoring and remembering, and travel during the holidays, and the travel with other family that may be at a loss, where you can sort of take that feeling of loss away from them, give them another place to gravitate. I like that point.
Yeah, it's been a difficult, even that sometimes has been taken away. Family members haven't been able to travel. And there've been, too many that we can count. Zoom Christmases or Zoom Thanksgiving celebrations. But I think any way to be together, whether it's using Zoom or whatever mode to try to be together is so important, because the isolation from COVID, I know, has created, just an added layer of sadness.
Yeah. And I wanted to, the point of travel, my cousin recently had a tragic loss in her family this past year. Mm-hmm. And I went to visit her over the year. I think my family, we traveled there in July. And I extended the invitation for her and another family member to come up for Thanksgiving. She was still so fresh dealing with her situation that she didn't want to leave her immediate family. But the other cousin stepped out and he joined us for the holiday, and he was just like, this was so refreshing, because otherwise he would have been engaged and engulfed into the memories of the loss of a family member that was lost. And so you touch one person, that makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
And it's all in the timing, isn't it, Judy? I mean, it's like they said earlier, some minutes you'll feel like being with other people and sharing, and other times you just need to be alone and to deal with it. And I'd like to add quickly too that when my husband was in trouble almost 2 years ago, both Northwestern and Advocate said that Unity would be a good choice for me. So they were good friends at the end. And at the very end, I thought I had my act together, but I didn't, regarding what to do with Jake, because we had wanted to give his organs and hadn't signed the paperwork. And so when the social worker, whose name I can't come up with, was at my house, she said, "Do you know Science Care?" And I said, "No." And so before the morning was over, Jake was taken away, and his tissues were then used like the next month for research. And so it's such a learning process that we don't take the time to do all the figuring before the fact. But you know, that with 5 wishes, Judy, that we studied last week because of you, there's so much to learn about the before and after of it all for them and for us. It's just such a journey for all of us. And I thank all of you so much for being there for me. Oh, and I wanted to say too that Northwestern's psychology department said that Living Well Resource Center in I think it's Geneva, Illinois, also has a lot of different programs for cancer survivors and victims and things. So that might be another organization to put on your list. And I'm
Thank
done.
you. I appreciate that. Thank you, because I'm always looking for avenues and informative groups that can provide for us and share with us. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your journey.
Thank you.
I would just like to say that I was blessed to be a hospice nurse, as well as I have my degree in social work. And I have noticed with grief that there's a trite phrase of a book. It's called "It's Okay Not to Be Okay." I think it's really, really important for so many people to let them know that it is okay that you're not okay. And you don't have to read the book or anything, but there's so many aspects to grief. And I was also blessed once years ago to meet Elizabeth Kubler-Ross when I was getting my master's here in Chicago. And she just taught me so much about the different levels of grief. And you can, I know things have changed today and they've added, more steps and everything, but still she supplied the building blocks for all of our grief, I believe. But it's really important to let people know that it's okay. You don't have to be happy and have a smiley face, and it's okay to grieve. And it's okay on your, like you said, Stephanie, on your own timetable and twisting around and curving around and all that stuff. That's so normal, but people don't know that. So good for you I love that slide of the grief. That was perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing.
I think too, on one of the slides that we couldn't show you today because it wouldn't pop up, but how others can support the bereaved. Like you were just saying, it's okay to not be okay. Well, I had a good friend once have a loss, and I just was so used to trying to console people by saying it's going to be okay and, everything's going to be fine. And, she looked right at me. This was many years ago. And she said, I just need you to listen. And it was really pivotal for me, as an intake coordinator in hospice, but also just, working in this type of career to learn that, you know, a few years ago. And I think one of the bullet points that, again, we couldn't show you, it says just listen and accept and understand refusals when people aren't ready to talk about it. You know, just knowing that you're there a lot of the time, you know, is enough for some people if they're not ready to talk. And just listening, that was a very, you know, that was my own experience, but I learned that that is just so powerful to just sit there and, you know, sometimes not say a word, but just be there.
Yeah, I find that to be so true, Caitlin.
And I think that's the difference perhaps between sympathy and empathy, Caitlin. I saw a video like last year sometime, and it was cartoon characters, but there was this wonderful voice, and they talked about, I just saw a big screen all of a sudden. So it had one person being sympathetic, which you think is very cool. And then the other person was empathetic. And the sympathetic person was not a very good listener. They just had to keep saying, well, at least this didn't happen, or, you know, well, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it, you know, and you just want to smack them. You just want them to shut up because you have important things to say right this very second, you know, and the empathetic person is a great listener.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think it did take, my dad got diagnosed with prostate cancer a little bit later. And I that too, when people would tell me that, you know, a lot of this is all just experience learned, you know, in living life. But, you know, I did appreciate the people who just listened. Exactly. And the empathy really comes across instead of just trying to find, well, this will be okay, or this will be, you know, and we don't know that, right? I think that being empathetic is just, again, just caring and really, truly putting yourself in that person's shoes. And yeah, I love what you just said. I completely, it's great. Yeah. It was a very wonderful lesson that I learned.
Yeah. If I can find that video, I will forward it to you guys.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. That was so great. That was good. I think it's very good for us to have this time to talk, to share, to understand our feelings, understand that it's okay to feel the way that you feel. It's okay to cry. I remember being at the doctor's office and I kept checking off the box for anxiety, and then I'd erase it. Then I'd check it off again, because you know you have to wait. They usually make you wait for like 30, 45 minutes. And once I got in his office, he said, I see you check off anxiety, and then you erased it. And I immediately started crying. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't want to cry in front of you. He gave me a box of tissue. He said, cry your eyes out. He said, just let it go. Just cry. So crying is good for us.
Mm-hmm.
And waiting for a doctor is an anxious time for sure, right?
Yes.
Yes, no, yes, no.
I was going to say, I remember a book. I don't know if it was Gail I don't know who wrote I'm Okay, You're Okay. Remember that book?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it's interesting to hear now of, you know, it's okay to not be okay, right? So it used to be I'm okay, you're okay. Everyone's okay. We're all good. Everything's fine. And now it's like, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to just be where you are at this moment. If it's not okay, you know, I'll just be here with you. It's really just being present and listening to help people, get through.
And one of the things I also like, more specifically about this group, and as we share and we talk about holiday gatherings and what are you doing during the week? One thing that really keeps me encouraged and happy is to know that you all are sometimes spending time together. You're spending time with family. And during COVID, you're taking the precautions. You're taking the testing prior to getting together. You're limiting your audience. And you're socializing more with people that you're very, very familiar with and comfortable with. So spending time is important. And I don't want to call out, but I'll say like Young, she's our Qigong instructor, and she and her family, her husband, and some neighbors, they'll get together and they'll take nature walks. They'll walk through a park. And I think that's very good mentally for us.
I do agree with COVID. I used to, not take as many walks and things like that. And then to stay safe, we, would say, okay, let's socially distance and let's go on walks. And that is an interesting way to look at it, to be positive instead of negative, having less people around you, but the people that were around you were your close knit group, and taking more walks and being outside. That was one of the positives that, if there's a positive, but, to look on the bright side of things, I go outside way more now, and my friends and family and I, we take those walks and things like that. So although it may not be a positive of COVID, that was something that I learned too, which was great. So yeah, I totally agree.
I'd like to say something. I found, and maybe you could comment on it, I found that when you're talking to someone who's grieving on a regular basis, if you say, how are you doing? Well, how are you doing? By asking that question, they're either going to go down a dark road or they're going to say, oh, I'm fine. And I find that I avoid that question. I'll say, what are you up to today? How's your day going? What did you do? And it starts them to talking about something other than their heartfelt loss. It's good for them to talk about it as much as possible, but to start your conversation off with, how are you doing? All of a sudden they make an assessment. Either I tell her how I'm doing or I say I'm fine. What do you all think about that question, or another way of engaging the person in a conversation initially?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I understand that. And particularly in hospice, we don't really ask, how are you doing? That's not a question that we ask with any regularity about how are you doing. It's more, I might change it just slightly. And, how's today going for you? How was your morning? Or something a little bit more specific and a little bit more guiding, as opposed to sort of an overall generality. I like the way that you phrase that, to really elicit, something that's maybe other than an emotional need, the need to sort of reflect emotionally, if that's just not where they are at that moment. So I'm in agreement with you about that.
I like that.
I'd like to say something, if I may. Sharon Loam.
Please.
Yes. Hi. I first met you, Judy, through the exercise program with Paul, so it's been a long time. I will be a widow for 6 years come September, and I think there are two big things going on right now, and I'm sorry for everyone who's suffering any kind of a loss, but I'll talk about widowhood. That would be something to deal with and to try to think, how will it be? Will it always be like this? But there's another loss we have, and that happened as a result, or is happening as a result of the pandemic, because we're never going to I'll never go back to life with my husband, but I'll also never go back to the kind of life I was trying to build for myself here. I became a docent at the Lincoln Park Conservatory and at the Edgewater Historical Society, and both of those are on hold. I like to read to children. I can't do it because we can't have in-person meetings. So we have a couple of new normals challenging us. One is a new normal. How will you be? Who will you be? And then the other one is, when will it be safe to be that person? We absolutely can't throw caution to the wind after 2 years of compliance and say, you know what, I'm just going to invite everybody over. And I have some people that I really like, and they're completely anti-vaxxers, and they keep saying, can I bring something for you to eat? You want to come over? And I've got to find the right way to say, no, I can't be comfortable with you, because I'll be 80 next year, and I have to advocate for myself. That's another thing that those who are left almost completely alone as a result of loss, is to learn how to be strong and to advocate for yourself. And sometimes I talk to my friends, one who's lost her husband 2 years ago, and then a couple of others whose husbands are in their mid to late 80s and who are not doing very well. And I try to say in the nicest possible way, they say to me, you're great. You're such, you took care of everything. But my husband did all of it. He was an advocate, and I had to learn how to be strong and smart and resilient and resourceful. And sometimes I say, well, have you ever paid your bills? Do you have your own checking account? Just silly questions that aren't silly at all, because at some point, one of a group, a husband and a wife or a family, they'll be gone, and something will be left for you to do and to take care of. So you also have to become a strong person. It's terrible to wake up and think, what do I have to look forward to today? And sometimes the answer is nothing. So you'll have to, I'm going out to the library after this. They're holding a book for me and I'm looking forward to reading it. And it's a mile to walk there. So I'm really going to bundle up. But so you have to learn to be alone, and you have to learn to be very, very smart and very protective of your good health. And then just hope that we all will come out of this and find some peace in our lives. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that was very important. And your experience around the loss of your husband, and then the buildup and the things, the aftermath, you know, this new normal that we have to live, and COVID, and, you know, it's so much more that happened that has kept us in a place where we feel as though sometimes we don't have an outlet. So thank you for sharing, Susan.
Thank you.
This Trilby, can you hear me?
Yes.
Another thing that we do say to people that is grieving, that it will be okay. But we don't know if it's okay. It will be okay. You know, healing takes time. And if we just sit and listen to them, that's more important than telling them things will be okay, because we don't know that. So how do we feel about that? Because that's one of the first things that comes up to us. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. They're crying and you say, and you patting on them. It'll be okay.
Trilby, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it just brought back memories. I remember as a child, I lost my grandmother, and I was crying, and someone was saying to me, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. And you're thinking, it's not okay. I just lost a loved one. It's not okay. You know, then you have to think about your spiritual beliefs, and why would God do this? And you have so much more to start understanding. And I think the words, it'll be okay, has just been something comfortable that people would say just to, when they didn't, I'm sure they had other things to say, but that was just a common comment. It's going to be
something
okay.
to pacify you.
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of times our grief, you know, the expressions of grief that are, you know, more outward are difficult for people to experience. They can be really overwhelming for others to experience. And so sometimes the need to say it'll be okay is almost for themselves too, because they really, they can't handle somebody who's kind of out of sorts and really sad or really angry or really irritable, that, you know, so sometimes it's just a way to like distance, you know, it'll be okay and I'm going to move on. But I think often it is, people don't know what to say. And unfortunately, oftentimes, especially those of us who have experienced grief, have received a lot of comments that we know are not helpful. And we can't always control what other people are going to say or do, right? But we can, you know, protect ourselves by just either, you know, creating a little distance or walking away, or, you know, just kind of moving on and appreciating that, okay, they don't know what they're talking about, but I'm gonna find someone or some other experience that I know is really going to be helpful to me.
I'm always at a loss for words when someone loses someone. And so my way of approaching them is I always just say, I'm extending love and a hug. And that's just to say, okay, I'm here for you if you need me. I don't, it's not so much that I feel what you feel, but I want you to know that someone else cares.
And sometimes I'll say too, because I can't understand what's a lot of people are going through, especially cancer survivors or widows and things like that. So a lot of the time I'll sit with families or my own family and say, I hear you. I'm here and I'm hearing you. I can't say that I understand exactly what you're going through, but I'm hearing every word that you're saying and I'm here. And I've been told, and at least people who do that for me, it's just such comfort. It's wonderful. So yeah, I agree with that.
Nobody knows exactly how someone else feels at the very same time. It's impossible.
Right.
My daughter.
Oh, keep going. No, please.
Well, my daughter lost her husband at the very beginning of COVID. And she lives in New Jersey and I live in Louisiana. And so one thing that we did, because it was in the midst of COVID, is we would just stay on the phone. And it was like we were in the same room, but she would cry and I would say, yes, yes, as if I was there patting her on the back. I would just wait and I'd read to her poetry to put her to sleep. And sometimes it would be in the middle of the night and I knew she was asleep, but we would stay on it. When she'd wake up, she'd say, Mom, and I would be there. So being there was good for me and good for her. But just hearing her when she'd cry and just saying, yes, oh, yes, yes, honey. Sometimes that's the most comforting thing you can say. And for people who've just recently lost somebody, they don't have the words. They don't, all they're doing is just feeling the pain. So if you can be there whenever you can, that is a big thing right there.
So true. Thank you for sharing. That's important. Being there for a person is very important at any time of the day or night. We're going into an hour of our session. And I think we've held the 19, 20 people very strong. Is there anyone that would like to add or comment on? Anything that you've taken from this that would be beneficial to you that you could share?
I'd just like to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great.
A lovely gallery community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just like to say, and I don't know whether it's exactly relates to this, but it does. When I was a teenager or younger, and somebody passed away, a relative, my parents never really talked about death or, I don't know, that compassion, and certainly both of them had compassion, particularly my dad. But when it came to death and loss and all those kinds of things, that wasn't passed on. So I'm at a loss as people are passing away. And it's always been that way. And I'm having a lot of difficulty, I'd say in the last year and a half or so, because we're all up in years. I'm just a little over 80. And I'm a photographer, And some of the other photographers that I knew when I was really active, all of a sudden, somebody's sending me an obituary of so-and-so or so-and-so passing away. And some of these people were really important as compassionate documentary photographers from the civil rights movement and things like that. So they weren't just picture takers. They were really important. Without them, we wouldn't have the pictures that remind us of that period. And it's just, when somebody sends me an email with a URL to click to read somebody's obituary, and some of these obituaries are, editorial, they're just not buried in the newspaper. They're written up as actual articles. And some of these appear in many newspapers: Sun Times, the Tribune, the New York Times. And that's one aspect, and it's getting pretty scary. And I'm saying to myself, gee, I haven't seen some of these people for 10 years. And then there's other people that have passed away in the last year or two who were people that I worked with and haven't, for some stupid reason, or the confrontation of going and seeing somebody that is sick, and of being a man, although I don't know whether it automatically comes with being a female, it's a real confrontation to me to have to go and sit with somebody who's really sick. And so I haven't done it. And then the next thing you know, you find out the person's dead and you can't make up for lost time. And so I don't know. That's why I'm saying that maybe this is a little over here or over there. In terms of how that fits into grief, it's really rough. And just this, and not, 2 hours ago, I get an email from my very best friend that I bike and walk with a lot and have done for, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 years. And he sends me and says his wife's sister just passed away. And she was in a nursing home and was having all kinds of troubles. So, it's that kind of thing of, well, finally she, out of her misery, and she's out of their life for having to deal with it. But I'm sitting there staring at the screen. What am I supposed to write to him or say to her? And like some of the folks here were saying, well, it'll be okay. Well, that's a really insensitive thing to say, because it ain't going to be okay, and hasn't been okay for quite a while. And it's, in many cases, it's been torture. So it's almost like we've got to learn how to be, I don't know what. It's almost, what do we do before we have to go through the grieving, so that we've covered ourselves by being compassionate with some of our folks that, I don't know, this is, I did write to my friend, I said, this has just been one difficult last year and a half, because not only has it been a pandemic, which has really interrupted a tremendous amount of things in our life. And I've written to myself about how that's really affected my life and not enabled me to do all kinds of things. But during that period of time, surprisingly, every once in a while you hear about somebody passing away. In addition to famous people or semi-famous people, people that, you went to school with or have, your neighbors for 30 years or who knows what. So I don't know, what I'm getting at is it's just really, and my wife has lost some friends too. And, you just can't say to somebody, I don't know. So I just don't know what to say to someone else. The only thing I'll say is one thing, and then I'll shut up. And that is, I think it's really crucial, instead of saying things to other people, to somehow feed them lines. And I don't quite know what those lines are, but some of the pros here could probably give us some of those lines where you can just sit there. And I think the most important thing is to listen to people that are going through the grieving process, and being there and being somebody to lean on. But if you haven't had that experience, or maybe you've had the experience of listening to people, but you're listening to them just to be nice, to hear about their vacation and their dog, and you really don't give a rat's ass about their dog or their vacation. And so you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, I'll tell them about our trip to so-and-so. They don't care about that. They care about their own trip. But this is entirely different. This is the real challenge. But it's just to be important to listen. And that technique, I don't know, maybe some of you folks can address that. That's it.
Well, I think that there's lots of opportunities to discuss that, and maybe that's another session for Judy to think about. But just to respond to you briefly, I appreciate the struggle, with what to say and how to be in the presence of someone who's grieving. I think less is more, and as you said, just being present and listening really is the key. And even just a comment of, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm sending you strength and peace at this time, and I'm here for you in any way. It's very brief, and it's not saying anything is going to be any other way. It just is. You're just acknowledging the loss and the difficulty that they're having, and just letting them know that you're there for them. And your remark about how to sit with someone who's ill or terminally ill. What do you say and how do you be? And again, I think it's less is more. Nobody's going to remember that you were there for 8 hours sitting at bedside, but they will remember even 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long protracted visit, but even a 15-minute visit from someone perhaps that they haven't seen in a long time, just your presence and literally your presence. And you could just sit in quiet if someone is non-responsive, to just literally have your social presence with them in that moment is incredibly comforting for the individual, I believe, and also for family. And that's all that's required, other than, truly a very short effort and opportunity to just be present with someone, even if they're not able to communicate, can be incredibly supportive. So that's what I would say in response. I think there's a lot more about how, some of the questions that you had, but I think for another time, perhaps.
Most definitely. And one of the things, Steph, that you said to me that I wrote down, and when you began, you shared talking about death, talking about loss. And it just brought back memories, because this whole session has brought back memories of my childhood. And one of the things that I remember as a child, when someone died, we always prepared meals and took to the family. And I think that was like an icebreaker, and it was also comforting for that person. So in this day and time, maybe sending a meal or bringing a sandwich bag along to someone, because when that person has, at that period of loss, especially an immediate loss, they're not thinking about eating, drinking. And so just to have something in that sense would be very helpful. And it could be an icebreaker. But I think everyone, I want to thank you all. We've been like an hour and 45 minutes. No, an hour and 15 minutes. But I just want to say this was a great session. This has been a session that I think we've had the most sharing in, and feelings, and have come forth. And I think it's been very beneficial. It's been great, because this is still a part of grieving. And Stephanie and Caitlin, thank you for providing the presentation, pulling together the information to sort of ease our pain and just remind us that it's okay, we're okay. And that there are avenues for us to pull ourselves back in. There are ways to cope. And I like that we had an opportunity to share, how do we talk to other people about grief? How do we approach them? So thank you. And thank you all for participating and sharing your most intimate details.